parents, in the month of August we celebrate breastfeeding all around the world, which is why I choose a breastfeeding related topic for this week's video. In the Western world, the willingness to breastfeed is increasing, but unfortunately many new moms divert away from the path of breastfeeding just because of bad practices, because of old habits, because of lack of real information and lack of support. So in this video we will explore 5 activities, 5 practices that are best avoided, as they can easily deviate you from the natural path of breastfeeding. My name is Keta Rax. I am a Lama's childbirth educator, a doula and a mom. Week after week, I provide you with evidence-based information on childbirth topics to help you to make truly informed, conscious decisions about birth, breastfeeding, and the postpartum season. If you want to be more empowered and prepare from a reliable source for the arrival of your little one, then just visit my website, which is the www.ownyourbirth.com, where you can choose from various childbirth course bundles and subscribe to my free childbirth workshop, where I give you super practical, easy to implement tips to make your birth smoother and more enjoyable. But let's now return to breastfeeding. Well, the first trap awaits you right after the birth of your baby during the so-called golden hour. And thank goodness it is nowadays common for babies to be handed over to their mothers right after birth. However, in some countries, in some hospitals, the golden hour is carried out in a somewhat peculiar way, because after the birth, the baby is indeed placed in direct skin-to-skin contact with the mother, but just for a few minutes. And then the baby is wiped or sometimes even washed, weighed, measured and dressed before being returned. So this way they eliminate one of the most crucial elements of the golden hour, which is the direct skin-to-skin contact. And why is the skin-to-skin contact so important? Well, during the pushing phase, the baby receives a cocktail of hormones that give you strength for the pushing, and that also makes the baby alert and curious to explore and find your nipples. And in this exploration journey, the touch of your skin, the scent of your body, and the sight of your dark nipples, this will guide him or her. However, a cleaned and dressed baby has much less stimulation, has limited stimulation for this active exploration. So if you want to breastfeed, then I suggest you just to keep your baby naked in direct skin-to-skin contact with your body in the first few hours after birth. The second trap to avoid also applies to the hospital stay. If you want to breastfeed, then keep your baby with you day and night. And the saying "practice makes perfect" that also applies to breastfeeding. So in order to successfully breastfeed, you need to practice, both you and also your baby. And the primary task during your hospital stay is to observe your baby's behavior and to learn to interpret the hunger cues and to feed your little one very frequently, so that he or she can receive sufficient colostrum through the frequent breastfeeding. And this very first milk, so the colostrum, this is a kind of yellow liquid that your breasts produce right after the birth, and it is appropriately referred to as a kind of liquid gold, because this tiny amount is really crucial for providing your baby with essential immunoglobulins, helping to stabilize the blood sugar level and aiding in the elimination of the very first poop, the meconium. So it is also helping to reduce the risk of jaundice after birth. And the frequent breastfeeding and nursing are also beneficial for you, because if you breastfeed frequently in the first days, then your breasts will transition to milk producing mode much smoother, and your engorgement, so the moment when the real milk starts to be produced, this will be less dramatic. However, if you breastfeed your baby only like every 3 or 4 hours, or when the nursery staff suggests it, then you may experience quite an uncomfortable engorgement around the 3rd or the 4th day after birth, almost as if rocks have grown into your breasts. On the other hand, if you breastfeed more frequently, then this transition will happen sooner, it will be less dramatic, and then this famous supply-demand balance will be established faster too. So if you want to breastfeed your baby, then just forget the nursery and keep the baby next to you day and night and breastfeed your baby very frequently. The third thing to avoid if you want to breastfeed is supplementary feeding. Tea, sugary water, plain water, formula, anything. Because how does this supplementary feeding interfere with breastfeeding? Well, if you feed your baby with anything else than your breast milk, then this will lead to longer intervals between breastfeeding sessions. And this may cause your breasts to become too full and signaling to the regulatory system that less milk is needed, so gradually leading to a decrease in milk production. And this can set you up for a vicious circle of needing more and more supplementations, leading to even less milk production, and the cycle continues. So therefore, it is essential to really thoroughly consider the very first supplementary feeding and reserve formula as a kind of last resort for a genuine necessity. Well, in the 21st century, clever marketers, they have made sure that multiple formula brands are available in the stores. And it also seems normal, almost seems normal to have just a little formula at home. However, if you think over, several decades ago, formula was only prescribed by pediatricians and it was available only in pharmacies. And that was for good reason. So if you think that you have a kind of low milk supply, the best thing to do is just to put your baby to the breast more frequently, as this will stimulate the milk production. This will increase the milk production. So the more you breastfeed, the more milk you will produce, because your body is really working so amazingly. The next breastfeeding trap is waiting for you right in your own home. Because many mothers try to ease the sleepless nights of the first few weeks by passing on one night feeding to the baby's father. And the idea might sound good at first. And I fully support fathers taking an active role in caring for their baby, but not like this. Because by outsourcing breastfeeding to your partner, you are trying to kind of violate biology. And it's totally regardless whether we are speaking about your own breast milk or formula in the bottle. And let us see now why. So if you skip a night feeding, it is quite likely that your breasts will become too full. And no matter how much you want to sleep, well, you will wake up due to this uncomfortable feeling. So that much for the rest. Moreover, by lengthening the time between two breastfeeding sessions, you send a signal to your regulating system once again that less milk is needed here. And this leads to a decrease in milk production, and you fall into the same vicious cycle that I mentioned earlier regarding supplementary feeding. On the other hand, if to avoid this you choose to pump while your partner is feeding the baby, well, you are just creating more trouble for yourself and your partner too. Because you will have to turn on the lights to pump, then to store the milk, your partner will have to prepare the bottle. So you both will wake up completely. So I suggest that instead of handing over or trying to hand over the night breastfeeding duty to your partner, it is much more beneficial if your partner helps you during the first few weeks by providing a kind of calm environment, by reinforcing your role as a mother, by encouraging you, hugging you when you breastfeed, and helping you with the household chores, and accepting that maybe during the first weeks, well, your home will be a little bit topsy-turvy for a while. So do not try to outsource nighttime breastfeeding and replace it with a bottle just to get some rest, as this may really derail the whole breastfeeding journey, and also you still may not rest well. Now let's look at the fifth trap? Well, this one is about pacifiers. And unfortunately, many hospitals around the world, they recommend having a pacifier in your hospital bag. But if you want to breastfeed, then don't fail for marketing. And simply do not buy and do not use pacifiers for your baby. Because what is a pacifier? Well, it's nothing else, but it's an artificial imitation of your nipples. So when your baby wants to be on your warm breast, it is not just for feeding, because your baby needs to feel your warmth, your closeness, to hear your familiar heartbeat, smell the scent of your body in order to feel secure. And when you give your baby a pacifier instead of holding him or her to your breast to breastfeed, that you are basically replacing this very essential human need with a kind of fake nipple. So not just in between brackets. We do not offer to our partner either the inflatable doll instead of a little cuddle, no? So furthermore, if your baby gets used to a pacifier, and babies can really easily get used to pacifier, it partially satisfies their sucking needs. And this may lead to shorter time at your breasts and to longer intervals between feedings, which can in turn lead to a decrease in your milk supply. So I know that it is very tempting to get a few hours of rest and a few hours of peace with a pacifier, but think about how natural and how normal it is for your vulnerable little baby to crave your closeness. So if you are able to skip the pacifier, you will not just increase your chances for successful breastfeeding, but you will save yourself from a lot of later problems too. So just think about the addiction to pacifiers and the hygiene issues related to those dummies. So let us now quickly recap these 5 breastfeeding traps which can make your breastfeeding journey more difficult. So if you wish to breastfeed, then make sure to be in direct skin-to-skin contact with your baby right after birth, and not just for a minute or 2, but for a longer time, as long as it feels good to both of you. The second advice is to keep the baby next to you day and night during the hospital stay and avoid the nursery. The third tip is to avoid supplementary feeding. Well, of course, unless it is really necessary and advised by a lactation consultant or by a pediatrician. My fourth advice was that you shall not try to outsource feeding duties during the night, but breastfeed your baby yourself. And my very last advice was to avoid pacifiers. Of course, I do not mean to say that if you do any of the above things, then it's the end of breastfeeding. Not at all. But the more complicating factors there are in your life, the harder it will be to stay on the path of breastfeeding, and the higher the chance that breastfeeding won't be an easy and joyful experience as it could be for most mothers. So if you want to breastfeed happily, I advise you to avoid these 5 things and not to fall into these traps. And if you want to prepare for a successful breastfeeding journey, if you want to make your decisions consciously concerning the birth of your baby based on reliable, trustworthy information, and if you want to shape your own birth story, then I suggest you to visit my website. And this is the www.ownyourbirth.com, where you can find various online childbirth class bundles. And while you are there, do not forget to subscribe to my free childbirth workshop to learn really practical, easy to implement tips to make your birth smoother and more enjoyable. Enjoy the childbearing season at its fullest and see you soon. Bye bye!